Hello, we will be starting the webinar in roughly 5 minutes. We'll be starting in 5 minutes. Thank you. And we'll be starting in roughly 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Marcus Holmes. I am the sales engineer here at Zycel. Today we're going to be talking about the new capabilities with the USG FLEX Series when you place the device in Nebula. So there have been some new changes and some new additions to the Nebula dashboard to interface with the USG FLEX H Series to kind of bring it a little bit more closer to the standalone version. So today we're going to talk about a few of those changes and enhancements within Nebula, and let's go ahead and get started. Actually, before we do, let's go ahead and go over some housekeeping. Hold all of your questions. You can type them in, and I will answer them at the very end of the webinar. So I will try to get to every question at the very, very end. So if you have a question, just go ahead and type it into the question area, and then I will address them at the very end of the webinar. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started. So with our new features in the FLEX H and Nebula, we're going to talk about a few things here. There are new menu items in the Nebula dashboard for the USG FLEX H Series. We have a new feature called interface naming, and then we also have the much anticipated configuration sync. So we'll go over all of these specifics for the FLEX H Series. I know that it is a little bit a long time coming because I know that the FLEX H update for UOS firmware 1.31 came out a little bit longer ago, and we're already on the cusp of the new Nebula version that's coming out next month. So we will be doing another webinar to cover those new features in the future. But now we're going to focus primarily on Nebula version 18.3 and then also UOS firmware 1.31 on the FLEX H Series. So with that, let's go ahead and move over to our live demo. I'm going to go ahead and switch my screen over so we can go ahead and take a look at the Nebula dashboard. All right. And here we go. All right. So now you should be able to see my screen for our Nebula dashboard. Most things on here will look the same. And again, for these new features pertaining to the USG FLEX H Series, you will need to be on firmware 1.31 because these features will sync over into the Nebula dashboard, and I'll go over those sync features a little bit later on. But first, let's go ahead and cover the new features that are in the configuration menu. So under configure, and if we go down to firewall, you'll see that we have this new section here. We have our objects, which was not available in the prior version of Nebula. Now we can create address objects, and also we can create specific address, zone objects as well, and address grouping. So this is very similar to what you would see on your firewall in standalone mode. So usually when you have the firewall in standalone mode, you can create specific objects and then use those objects in your specific rules. So if we go over to address, we can create all these different types of address objects. So we can do geography-based or geo-IP. We can create specific objects for certain devices that are on the local LAN. We can also do that for external addresses as well. So here we have different address objects that have been created, and these, when you create them on Nebula, they will also sync back to the local interface. That basically means that if you create an address object in this menu and you go into the local GUI, either via the local side or through the SSH tunnel that is available in Nebula, you will find that these objects that you've created will sync over to the local side. So this is a great help when creating specific rules, because instead of having to enter in the IP address, now you can refer to specific things by their address object name. So this is putting us closer and closer to having Nebula be the exact same as what you would see configuration-wise for the local menu in the GUI. Okay, so again, you can create address objects and you can create address groups. So similarly to the local interface, if you have an address object, you can then create a specific address group. And then this will allow you to put in all of your devices in a specific group, so that if you need to create a firewall rule or a policy rule or a policy route or anything that requires an object, you can now refer to that object based on its group. Now, I would like to point out one thing, and this is something that was a little bit jarring at first. You'll notice that in the firewall menu, the menus seem to have shrunk and you're not seeing things. This is actually intentional. So you'll see that we have the security service, which is going to be all of your UTM services. This remains the same. You'll see that everything that you normally were used to in Nebula has retained in this menu. So we can go through and create all of our UTM policies within the cloud, and it will sync over to the local side. However, one thing that is missing, you will see, is you'll see that the firewall settings are missing. And there's a reason for that. And the reason being, my understanding, is that in order for the firewall sync to work, and I'll go over the firewall sync in a little bit, it basically does not appear to be ready right now, meaning that there's the ability to make a configuration change and it will sync over to the cloud. However, because that feature is not available and it's not ready yet, they have since removed it from the cloud, because any changes you make in here will sync over to the local side. So as of right now, and I believe until the next Nebula version when it will be available, anytime you need to make a firewall rule, you will have to log into the firewall's GUI. Now, of course, you can do that from Nebula by going over to the Nebula Control Center. You can go into your devices menu, or in the dashboard, you can click directly on firewall. This will take you directly to the device itself. All we would have to do is scroll down to the very bottom, and then you'll see Remote Configurator. And then if you click this button to establish it, it will create a tunnel that will allow you to gain access, a secure remote access to your GUI through Nebula. So anytime you need to make a firewall change or any menu item that you do not see in here that you need to make changes to, and that's going to be, unfortunately for right now, your NAT, any policy routing right now, will have your NAT policy routes and your security policies will need to be done in the remote configurator or in the local GUI, okay? So that's the new options that are available. I know it seems like a little bit of a step backwards, but this is putting us on the right track for having the firewall be exact or having parity between the local and the cloud-based management. Now, one of the other things I do want to point out really quick as a feature set is we've added the option to create a description for your interfaces. So very similar to how in the local side, we can go through and actually add a description for our interfaces now. So this is something that has been added in the newest version of Nebula for UOS 1.31. Okay. Now, moving on from that, let's talk about, or actually before I go on to anything else, in your description here, there are some rules that I would like to point out for your description. And the rules are that whenever you name something in the interface, there is a caveat. You cannot name your interface to be Ethernet, TCP, VLAN, bridge, WLAN, cellular, aux, tunnel, status, summary, and all. So those are the names that you cannot put in there. And if you actually try to put that in, it will actually pop up with a disclaimer saying that you cannot use that particular name. So usually it should pop up and it will say that, but it looks like it's not doing that here, so I won't save it. But basically, it will tell you if there is a name conflict, it will pop up when you try to save it, and then it will say that you cannot name the interface that particular name. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about configuration sync. All right, so this is the biggest enhancement in addition to our firewalls on the FLEX H series. Now, previously, if you were using an ATP or a USG FLEX, or if you are on an older version of the FLEX firmware, FLEX H firmware, if you want to configure a device in Nebula, we'll take the ATP and the older FLEX series, for example. If you wanted to configure that in Nebula, and you currently are already using that firewall in standalone mode, meaning that you have it with local access only, it's not connected to the internet, and you have a configuration on it. It's a very massive configuration with many different rules, many different settings. If you wanted to migrate that device into Nebula with the older hardware, unfortunately, you had to default and wipe your configuration. That configuration was lost. There was no way for you to transfer that configuration into Nebula. So anytime you wanted to go and put a firewall in Nebula, you had to start over from scratch. You had to default it, put it into Nebula, and then reconfigure everything from scratch. With the latest firmware, with 1.31 on the UOS with the firewall FLEX H series, that is no longer the case. That means that if you are currently using the USG FLEX H at a customer's location or at your home or at a business, and you've already got it configured, and you decided, I want to put this into Nebula, well, you no longer have to wipe the configuration. All you would need to do is onboard the device into Nebula, and that's it. Meaning that if you wanted to put in a Nebula, all you would have to do is go into your license and inventory and add the serial number and MAC address in. And then once it is part of a specific site and organization, that's all you will have to do. At that point, when you onboard a firewall that's already in standalone mode into Nebula, it will automatically copy the configuration that's currently on the device and copy it directly into Nebula itself. So there's no longer a need to wipe your configuration. There's no longer a need to default and reconfigure everything. It will automatically copy your configuration over. Now, there's a couple of things that you need to keep in mind with this, and that is, I know that with our with our switches and access points, you're accustomed to say, going in and configuring everything. Let's just say that the access point or switches are offline. You can go in and onboard the device and start configuring everything and then plug the device in to get a provision. Well, with the FLEX H series, it's a little bit of the reverse. So that means that when you onboard a firewall into Nebula, you can't pre-configure everything in Nebula. Because once it's onboarded, that initial onboarding, what will happen, it will copy the current running configuration off the firewall into Nebula. So just remember that if you're going to onboard a firewall with UOS 1.31 or higher into Nebula, just know that you have to have your configuration come from the firewall, meaning that you can't go in and say, all right, well, I'm going to the firewall is being shipped to the customer's address right now. I'm going to add the serial number and the MAC address, and then go in and start configuring, your IP addresses, your VPNs. If you do that, it's not going to matter, because the moment that firewall is plugged in and it connects to Nebula and it syncs with Nebula, it's going to take the current configuration, which is the default because it's been shipped, it's a new device. It'll take the running default configuration and copy it directly into Nebula, and it will wipe out that configuration. And that is mainly for just onboarding. Now, when it comes to managing your firewall, you can manage it from, once it's in Nebula, you can manage it from local, standalone, or you can manage it directly from the Nebula cloud. Meaning that if you make a change in the firewall settings, so if I come over to configure and I decide I want to make an address object in Nebula, it will automatically sync that configuration over to local mode and vice versa. So if you make a change in the local GUI, it will automatically sync that information over into Nebula. Now, there's a question there: what happens if you have two admins that are configuring the device at the same time? Well, as of right now, we suggest that you try not to. However, we do have some mechanisms in place to try to prevent configurations from being overwritten. So there is a polling interval that occurs when using the USG FLEX H Nebula. And that polling interval is roughly anywhere from 6 to 9 minutes. What that's going to do is it's going to poll and look at any changes on your local side and then sync it to Nebula. However, if you are in the local GUI and you make a change, and at the same time the cloud user decides to make a change, what it will then do is it will try to supersede the local config over, or the local change over the cloud configuration. So it's going to also be based on the polling interval as well. So usually you'll find that the local config will, take over, but it's just going to depend on when that last interval for the polling was taken. So if it was taken close to the time of the change, it will automatically take the local side. However, there are some instances where it will try to take the cloud configuration over the local configuration. Now, this is something that our engineers are looking to enhance in the future so that there aren't any type of configuration mismatches. But for now, we would suggest and advise that you try not to configure them in the cloud and in the local side at the same time. Now, if there is an instance where you find that your configurations are out of sync, say maybe you did make the mistake and you had 2 users that are logged into both the cloud and the local side at the same time making configuration changes, what you can do is come down to the actual firewall device menu, and there's an option here for the configuration override. So basically, if there is a difference between the local GUI settings and the Nebula settings, say for instance, somebody went in and made a change, what we can do then at that point is use this option to do the configuration override, meaning that we can override the configuration that's in Nebula with the local GUI. Okay, so this is a very good setting to use if you are finding that the settings are not matching up, meaning that, let's say somebody went in and made a change on your firewall and you notice that the configurations aren't syncing up, we can force it from the GUI side over into the Nebula side. So if somebody made a change to a VLAN and you look at your local side and you're finding that the VLAN is not correct, you can go and force that particular change. Okay? So that's pretty much the main things that have been enhanced with our Nebula with the USG FLEX H series. It's pretty short and sweet. I will say that we are getting closer and closer to having some settings be the same between the two. And I also do want to point out there's one thing I did miss that you won't see it here, but we now do support with the FLEX H series, we do support device HA. So the way that device HA works is that you have your high availability. If you have 2 firewalls and you want to have a hardware failover, we do now support that in Nebula. And the way that it will work is that you would register, both of your devices. You would go into Nebula, but you go into your local configuration on the firewall and set it up as device HA. And we do have a walkthrough for that, and that's something that I will probably cover in a later webinar, probably in May, to kind of go over that. But with device HA, we do support it in Nebula, and the way that it will work is that when you have your primary and your secondary assigned to your Nebula site, and you have device HA already set up, what it will do is once it recognizes that it is in device HA, it will automatically take the license. You only have to buy 1 set of licenses, and it will apply it to whatever device is the primary. When the primary goes down and the secondary kicks in, the licenses will automatically transfer over to the secondary device, and that way you will still only have to retain 1 set of licenses. Now that's something, again, I will cover in a later webinar. It is a little bit more in depth than that, but I did want to point that out, that is a feature that is also now available in Nebula. Okay. So with that being said, I would like to go ahead and stop my screen share for the time being and go over any questions that you may have right now. So let me go ahead and bring up the Q&A. And the first question I have here is, what is the estimated timeline to have the firewalls fully into Nebula? We can't buy the current Flex models and are forced to purchase the H models, but we haven't completed the support for it. The understanding that I have is that there are some features that are slated for 2026, and those are more on the fringe setting side. So we're talking about supporting RIP and OSPF and routing protocols. I know those are slated for Q1 of 2026, but I believe the timeline is still to have about 99% of everything by the end of this year. Now, of course, things can change, there could be some development issues, but the idea is that by the end of this year. Now, there are some models that we still have stock of when it comes to the older Flex series. I believe you have to check with our sales team to see which ones we still have in stock. But right now, we do still have some models that are available, but there are some that are kind of harder to find. But as of right now, again, the timeline is roughly the end of this year. Next, is there a feature that will have multiple backups of your firewall configuration, both in local and Nebula, or you're able to roll back? Yes. So with the current version in 1.31, you actually can do backups on your device. Now, when it comes to the local mode, you can do multiple backups on there. You would just need to go to File Manager, and you can schedule yourself to do multiple backups of your firewall. There's a couple of options that you can do for the backup, but usually it's just copying the startup configuration file, the running configuration file. You can copy that to your desktop, or you can schedule it so that it will automatically make copies of that. Now, as far on the Nebula side, yes, there is an option to save the configuration. You can do a backup and a restore. Let me see if I can reshare my screen so I could show you where that option is. Give me just a minute. All right, so my screen here, if we scroll down here, we have our backup and restore. So you just hit backup, and you will need the Pro Pack, but on my machine, I don't have Pro Pack on this particular device, but you can just hit backup, and you can also do a scheduled backup as well. So you can do that in Nebula. I'm not exactly sure of what the limitation of how many backups you can have, but I do know that you can do a scheduled backup on the firewall in Nebula and also in the local side as well. All right, moving along. How long will it take for both to sync? So for this particular option, when it does the poll, it's usually within seconds. So it's going to do a polling. It's going to find, look for configuration change, and once it sees that configuration change, it takes a couple of seconds for it to sync the configuration over from the local side to the cloud. So you shouldn't see a very long delay with the configuration sync. The next question is upgrade H series from Nebula or local. It doesn't make a difference. So yeah, so when you're if you're speaking of upgrading the firmware to 1.31, you want to upgrade the firmware from the local side. So if you're on 1.30, upgrade to 1.31 locally, so you can get these features. I think that there's an option for that. Let's see. I only see Marcus, no slide. I'm not exactly sure, was that more towards when I was trying to show the options or not? Can you explain a little bit on that one? And then I'll move on to the next question. Will the Nebula admins be synced into the local GUI so that there is no need to add individual users and their MFA into local mode? That's something that we're investigating, and hopefully should have something like that in the future, because I know that as of right now, when you bring up the local GUI, you have to understand that the login for the local GUI is going to be separate from the login for Nebula. So that basically means that when you open up the remote configurator to get into the device, or you're using local mode, you have your own set of admin login accounts. However, logging into Nebula itself is going to be based on your Nebula account. So I believe that's something that we're looking to enhance in the future, but as of right now, they're separate. So if you want to manage it from Nebula, you have to use your Nebula login, your email and password, but for the actual login to the GUI, you have to have the admin for that particular device. Can you show me where to set up the VoIP priority rules in the new interface? So on the new interface in Nebula, because those options have been removed, that's going to be more of a policy route kind of configuration, and that has to be done on the local side. So you can't do it in Nebula right now until they put the option for the NAT and the policy routes back in. You will need to do all of your configuration for VoIP or any type of bandwidth management or priority rules in the local interface using the remote GUI option. The next question is, when is the local AP controller support coming? As of right now, it's going to be supported in next month. That is tentative, that might change, but as of right now, I was told it was going to be April for the AP controller in Nebula, or not Nebula, but on the USG FLEX H side. So I know that there was a lot of anticipation for that. We've had a lot of questions from customers because the USG FLEX H does not have the WLAN controller, but my understanding is in the next firmware update, which should be coming out next month, it will support the AP controller. And then we have the answer limits to 10 backups, I believe. So there we go, yeah. So you have 10 backups. I believe we are going to ask if we can expand that out, just because there might be some users who might need more than that, but I think it's just more to save space. All right, I have a question. Some customers request to use the FLEX H without registering to Nebula for security reasons. Will that still be possible going forward? So right now, if you want to register the FLEX H, there isn't an option to do that as of right now. You can register the device for My Zycel, but as far as going into Nebula, if you choose not to use Nebula, you don't have to register it with Nebula. But if you're talking about registering the device with My Zycel right now, it's still kind of a requirement specifically because we need a way to notify you when licenses are expiring. We need a way to contact you if there's new firmware updates. So yeah, if you have a USG FLEX H and you need to onboard or you need to install a UTM license, you will still need to register the device with My Zycel, but you don't need to register with Nebula if you choose not to use it. For remote config mode, is there a forgotten password for recovery? Yes, so remote configuration mode, if you have lost the password, as of right now, there isn't a way to recover the forgotten password. You would have to go on site because there are some tools that you can use to console in to back up the current configuration over console. We do have a recovery option, but it does require you to be on site. I believe that's something that we're looking into in terms of resetting the password remotely. But as soon as we have that information, we will make that information known. Is there a possibility to import a backup from the USG 110, for example, to the USG FLEX H series? Yes and no. The only way, let's say that if you have a USG 210 and you want to go to the USG FLEX series, you actually need to go through our configuration converter. We do have a configuration converter tool that goes all the way back to the 210, 110 series. However, in order for you to go from such an older device to the USG FLEX series, you have to go through two configuration converts, meaning that going from a USG 210, you have to convert it to a USG FLEX 200. Then once you have the USG FLEX 200 configuration, you can then convert that to a FLEX 200H. So on our configuration utility website, I just type in Zycel configuration converter. You will be able to go back as far as the 110, 210, 310, 1100 series, but you have to take steps to convert your configuration over. So yes, you can, but there's going to be some steps involved. There's also going to be a list of what models will sync up with what models. So that means that you can't take a USG 110 and then go to a Flex 700. You can only do like devices. So a 110, I believe, will go to a Flex, I think, 200 and 100, but then from there you can only stay within those particular model sets. Another question is, how long will a gold license trial take to activate it? It timed out and I can't get it activated. Anytime that we've seen customers that have issues with license or any type of trial to activate, it's usually an indication that there's a problem with the DNS. Usually it takes no more than about 10 seconds for it to activate, and if you're finding it timing out, what I would suggest that you do is, if you're local to the GUI, go into your DNS settings and adding a public DNS to your DNS. So instead of using your ISP's DNS, use something like 8.8.8.8 or 4.2.2.2, and usually that will resolve the issues, because for some reason there are some ISPs that have a difficult time trying to resolve the Zycel license host URL. So I would try to do that if possible. Okay, and I will go ahead and leave the questions open for another 5 more minutes. I have another question. Is there a current roadmap for the Flex H Series? What will come next? If you're talking about any new models, right now, I don't believe there's any more models coming out that I know of. We basically, the highest end that we have right now is our Flex 700H. I do know that we do have some new switches in the pipeline, but as far as on the firewall side, no, I don't have any new hardware that's coming out. We're focusing more on trying to get the Flex H Series to have the parity between the cloud and localized mode. And again, we are having a Nebula update to 19.0 next month, and this is going to be a very large update with a lot of new features. And we will be releasing a new firmware as well for the firewalls for UOS at the same time. Firmware roadmap. We do have a list that we can provide to you of features that are slated to come out. Just email me, marcush@zycel.com, and I will see if I can forward that over to you. Oh, and then I do have a correction. Let me actually go back. So for the firmware itself, just to give you a heads up, so when it comes to Nebula, we do release Nebula updates 4 times a year, major updates 4 times a year. So it's usually roughly January, and then Around April is usually the big update where we uptick the major version number. So it's usually April that begins the new cycle, and then from there, the next update is usually around July, and then October, and then January of the following year. January is usually the last update for Nebula for that particular major version, and then we tick up to the next major version. So next month is going to be the 19.0 latest version, major version release. And I do have a correction for the configuration utility. There actually is an issue, I believe, when going from the legacy to the USG FLEX, because it doesn't put it on the correct firmware for the second conversion. So we're looking to have that fixed. So just keep looking into that, and we'll have an update for you on that particular issue. Next question, does the USG Lite 60AX have the same firmware like the H series, or how is the feature there? So for the USG Lite 60AX, it's completely different. If you remember, we used to have a USG 50AX. So it's a completely different firmware, and you'll note that you can't take the configuration from that and treat it the same way that you would a USG FLEX 100H. So it's completely different because it's more designed as a SOHO device. There are some features compared to the USG FLEX H series that aren't the same. So you do get, your free ransomware signatures, but you don't have the same level of configuration on, say, like UTM services like the USG FLEX H does. So you don't have application control, things like that. So they're a little bit different, and that's why they're different. So the way to slot the 60AX is if you have a customer that just needs a basic ransomware protection, maybe they already have a software solution for content filtering, so on and so forth. I mean, you can put in the USG 60 Lite AX. Those are for the small home office kind of environments. Does the Zycel ZCNE training provide training on both the newer H series model or the older Flex series, or both? I believe as of right now, it is the older ones, and they're looking to put in the newer ones as well. We do still try to do as much as we can in the webinars to kind of cover the new features. If you're looking for a specific type of training, you can contact our sales department, and they'll get in contact with me, and we can set up some type of one-on-one training for anything that you need. Next question. It would be great if those devices would have the same UI and internal working. I don't know what the plans are for the 60AX, if they're going to be the same, if they have any plans to make them the same. I know that when it comes to the Flex H series and the rest of our devices, we're trying to get everything kind of looking the same. So if you've noticed on, say, the XGS 2220, you'll know that the UI on the GUI is very similar to the USG Flex H series. And the idea is to have it look very similar, kind of have the same look and feel as Nebula. So you'll see that it has the same color scheme, the white and the green, and the black. I don't know if there's any plans to put a dark mode on the Flex H local GUI, but I do know that the look and feel, they're trying to get those devices to be the same. As far as the 60AX, I'm not 100% sure on that. Is the redundant ISP heartbeat configurable 1 minute 30 seconds done local in Nebula? If you're talking about the sync for the heartbeat for the Nebula configuration to have the device contact Nebula, right now it's not configurable. I believe there is going to be an enhancement so that it can be configured, but as of right now, it's set, and I don't know the exact timing on the configuration heartbeat for the ISP side. Or if you're talking about the failover, that can be done, I believe, in the CLI. So if you're talking about a dual WAN to have it fail over, what you can do if you're talking specifically for the dual WAN is in, let me see, I might have to bring up my screen, but in the WAN settings on Nebula, there is a connectivity check. So if you're talking about dual failover, what you'll need to do is set your connectivity check on the device. And right now, it doesn't look like they have the timeout mechanism that you're looking for. What I would do is I would go into the local side GUI if you're on 1.31 and set it up there. And I can verify that you should be able to. Just give me 1 second, because on that particular, you can't do it in Nebula because there is no option for you to set the fail rate like you would see like on the local side. And basically what we're talking about here is if you have a dual WAN and you wanted to ping the connectivity check gateway address, you can have it check the specific address to check to see if the connection is down. And if it fails after X amount of times, then it will automatically fail over. So as of right now, I'm pulling up the WAN interface. I do believe we do have it there, yes. So let me bring up this screen here. Right, so here we go. So on your local side, you will just need to come in and set your connectivity check here for your WAN and set your timeout and your fail tolerance. So you can put it as, the check timeout every 1 second or every 5 seconds, and then you check your fail tolerance. And then after it fails, you can have it do that. Now, check succeeds when, you can just say when any or all, but basically if you need to do any type of WAN failover connectivity check for right now, do it on the local side, and it will automatically put it in the CLI side on Nebula, so it can read it. It's just that there's no representation right now on the GUI in Nebula to set this up. So I would set this up on the local side instead of waiting for it to be in Nebula. You still have the ability to do it there. All right, can you migrate configuration from older model routers to USG FLEX Series? Yeah, so as I stated earlier, yes, you can, but I was just informed, unfortunately, as of right now, if you're coming from the legacy 110 or 210, there seems to be an issue where using the configuration utility doesn't put the USG FLEX, we going from the 110 to say a Flex 100, it doesn't put it on the correct firmware, so they're looking to fix that, and they should have that fixed soon. But we do have the ability to migrate from, say, the Flex to, or an ATP, like an ATP 200 or a Flex 200 to a Flex H200. It's just that the older legacies, we just need you guys to just be a little bit patient for us to fix that issue, but we will have the ability to go from the legacy as well. Are all the local router settings now available for Nebula configuration? As of right now, only certain things are available in Nebula right now, but you still have the local GUI access. So as of right now, the main thing that we have that was added was the zones and the objects, the address objects, the address group objects. But with this update, they have taken the security settings for your security policy for your firewall. That has been taken away, the NAT and the policy routes. Those will need to be done in local mode, probably until next month on the new update. But as of right now, if you can't find it in the Nebula menu, it will be available in the local menu. But fear not, because of the configuration sync, any change you make on the local side will still sync to Nebula, even though you may not see it. So for instance, if you go in and make a one-to-one NAT, or you go in and make a port forwarding rule, if you're port forwarding, say, 3389 for RDP, you make it in the local GUI side, it'll sync to Nebula, you just won't be able to see it on the config side. So it's still there, but you just don't have a representation. Is Nebula subscription-based? So with Nebula, we have our base pack. Our base pack allows you to configure the devices and do pretty much everything you need to do with the devices. The subscriptions come in when you want to, say, on the firewall side, we have our UTM or Gold Security Pack, which gives you all of the licenses for your UTM services. That's going to be your application control, your content filtering, your anti-spam, anti-malware, and sandboxing and IDP. That is a subscription service that's separate from actual Nebula. That's more of a UTM subscription. and that is bound both to the local side and Nebula. So it's pretty much separate because it's bound to the subscription service of the UTM. However, as of Nebula for itself, yes, we do have a Pro Pack and a Plus Pack, but those just give you enhanced features. You don't have to have a Pro or Plus Pack. You can just use the free base pack for Nebula. However, you will be missing out on certain features. So in base pack, if you need to have logging retention in Nebula, you only get 24 hours of log retention in Nebula on the base pack, meaning that if you are a person that needs to go through logs or needs to see logs past 24 hours, then you will need to upgrade to the Pro Pack or the Plus Pack, because those give you longer retention for your logs. So the Pro Pack will give you a full year of log retention. So if you are working for a customer that needs to have the logs retained in Nebula for a longer period of time, you would need the Pro Pack. Next question, if I understand correctly, there is no H model series with included Wi-Fi. There is a USG FLEX 100 HW. So that is the only one that has the built-in Wi-Fi radio. So that would be the USG FLEX 100 HW. And that has, I believe, the AX radios for the FLEX H. Okay, I'll leave the questions open for like another 2 minutes. Is there plenty of stock available for the H series? I believe there should be through the local distributors. You will have to contact your sales rep. They will be able to track them down for you. Will there be an introduction soon after the firmware for 1.40 is released? Yes, so I think we're going to plan on trying to do a webinar. We are actually having some internal training on this very soon, and I believe that once we have that information and we have enough to make a webinar on, we will go ahead and release a webinar for that. Is there a best method to make requests for new features or to vote on the most important features to implement next in the context of the H series integration with Nebula? I would say if you have any feature requests, I would contact your sales rep, who will then forward it on to either tech support or myself, and we will be able to work with our product managers to try to implement it. So if you do want a feature request implemented, please, if you do contact us, I think it would help us a lot if you were to provide us with a use case and just give us as much information as you can as to why you need a specific feature implemented, and that will help us as well. Is the VPN feature now subscription-based for client to router? So on the FLEX H series, the older IPsec SecU extender does not work. So you will need to use the new subscription-based IPsec VPN client. One of the things that is really great about the new VPN client is going to be the script that you can run. So with the VPN client, you can have it export the script. And then also, if you choose not to use our VPN client, we do have the ability to use the built-in IPsec on Windows and Mac OS and iOS, meaning that if you choose not to use our IPsec VPN client, you can use the built-in one on your devices, and it will provide a certificate script that you can install on those particular devices. I actually have it installed on my iPhone, so when I travel, I'm able to VPN directly from my iPhone directly back into my firewall here at my house. So it's a great feature to have. So if you choose not to use the subscription-based one, you can use the built-in one for Mac OS, iOS, and Windows. Okay, I'll leave it open for a couple more seconds here for questions. Which H series would you recommend for small to medium businesses? That's kind of a difficult question to ask because it's going to be very dependent on what the customer is doing. One of the first things that we usually look at is going to look the ISP speed coming in, how many devices we're looking at supporting, and then what feature set you need. So it could be as small as a USB FLEX 100H. I've seen even those customers have small businesses. They run a lot of things that eat up a lot of firewall sessions. And so for one customer, we actually suggested a 500H, mainly for the ISP speed and because they needed a lot of sessions, even though it was a small business. If you have any questions like that, you can definitely contact our sales reps. Usually they'll loop me in and we can kind of go over any type of specific client needs that you have, and we can better assess the type of equipment you're going to need and what model you'll need. Is there a table or document that compares the H models for bandwidth, et cetera? We have a couple of battle cards that you can ask our sales reps for that gives comparisons to third parties, but as far as the table, if you go directly to our website and go to the product matrix, for that particular device, it breaks down the maximum sustained throughput with the UTM services on or off, and then it gives you what the overall theoretical maximum throughput is for each device. So while we don't have a table that breaks them all out, right now you have to go into each individual one to get the breakdown. Okay, all right, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close off this webinar. Thank you for joining. I'm actually going to be doing another webinar on April 17th when I go over the best practices for securing your FLEX H series, both in the local mode and in Nebula. So I look forward to giving that presentation and going over all of what we have to offer, especially when it comes to best practices. It is something that we get asked a lot, specifically from our sales side, and all of our customers want to know what's the best way to secure these things. What's the best way to make sure that we have everything locked down so that nothing can happen to them. So I will be going over that for best practices for optimization and your protection for your FLEX H firewalls. And again, that's going to be on Thursday, April 17th at 11 a.m. Pacific. And again, I want to thank you for joining our webinar, and that's going to be it for me today. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. If you have any other questions, you can email me directly. That's going to be Marcus, M-A-R-C-U-S-H, at Zycel.com. Again, M-A-R-C-U-S-H, like hotel, at Zycel.com. Thank you so much, and I will see you on the next webinar.